Hello and welcome to the Sober Bliss podcast with me, Gail, and my amazing guest. I finally quit drinking for good in March of 2018, and one of the things that helped me was connecting with people on the same journey as me, hearing their stories and finding inspiration. No matter where you are on your journey to sobriety, I hope you enjoy listening to these stories and hope they bring you inspiration, joy and light so you can find your own sober bliss. Hi everyone and welcome to another edition of Sober Bliss Meets with me, Gail, where I talk to fabulous sober people on this journey with me. And today I'm really excited because I've got the wonderful Victoria and Lucy all the way from Australia. And you may know them from their fabulous podcast, Sober Awkward. Hi, Victoria. Hi, Lucy. Thank you so much for joining me. It's lovely to have you.
Thank you, Gail. Lovely to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Oh, my pleasure. I've been really looking forward to this because I listen to your podcast and it's just so relatable and so down to earth and normal, which is what I really, really like, because we think, I don't know about you, maybe you can chip in, like we think when we are going to stop drinking or when we are in the process of stopping drinking or even a little bit sober, we think that we are a bit weird, we think there's something wrong with us, and it's just so reassuring to know that actually we're not alone and there are millions probably of people who are exactly like us and going through exactly the same thing. Was that been your experience, your worry or feeling before you stopped drinking? Victoria, do you want to go first?
Well, the reason we started the podcast, I think, was exactly that reason. We were both struggling on our own for far too long, trying to give up and start and stop and all of these things, where we felt very alone in our sobrieties early on. And, you know, it can feel very isolating when you don't know that there's a whole community out there. I didn't know for a very long time that there was even this sober curious thing going on, or that I fitted into this vast, you know, sober curious spectrum. So yeah, that's why we really created the podcast, is so people didn't feel that, and to know that, look, there are other women, there are other people out there who have had exactly the same experience as you and have suffered with anxiety and alcohol related illness and mental health issues. And it's actually a very, very common problem that many, many people suffer with behind closed doors. Yeah. And yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. That's exactly our reason. That is exactly our purpose, is to resonate with people so they don't feel alone. I think Lucy would say the same.
Yeah, I would, of course, I always say exactly the same as you, Vic, but I just try and say
I've trained her well.
No, it's a slightly more personal experience for me, because I had tried to give up so many times, and the one time I succeeded was when I found a sober friend, and that was Vic. So for me, that was life-changing. So to be able to say to other people, hey, look, we're in the same boat as you, there's lots of people out there, let's all connect with one another, was so important, because it was my lifesaver, really. And to be able to do it with Vic, the person who was there, who helped me through from day one, it's been great to be able to help other people, but also it's a very personal thing, because it came so soon after I started my sober journey as well.
Yeah. Oh, you mean the Sober Awkward podcast kind of was created quite early on in your journey, Lucy?
Oh yeah, it was created from my journey, really. Yeah. I met Vic and I got sober 3 days later, and we became close friends and talked non-stop about the wonders and weirdness of sobriety. And it just seemed, it was such a powerful tool for me, having a friend, having somebody to talk to, somebody to normalize it. And, you know, you talk about, you know, people feeling weird. You do feel weird. You feel out of place. You're off the mainstream. And just to have somebody to say, yeah, I did that. and sometimes even to have a laugh at it or a cry at it, which is what we have done many times in the past, was what saved me. And then all we did was we started recording our chats, and that was how Sober Awkward came about. I make it sound easier than it was. We've had a lot of help with the recording and things, but essentially they are just two people on a sober journey talking about their experiences in the hope that we might help a few other people.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you definitely do. A lot of people in my other group and on my membership, they always say, oh, have you heard the latest podcast from Lucy and Victoria? I've got a friend in New Zealand actually who regularly walks along the beach listening to you both. So thank you for doing the podcast for me and for you and for everybody else. It's just so lovely.
We just love doing that podcast because for us, it's kind of like how we used to feel about going to the pub.
Yeah.
We get excited about it because we get to mingle, and we're all English. And Alan, who owns the recording studio, we sort of roped him in quite early on. And, you know, he's just an English bloke as well. And we live in Australia. So, you know, going into the recording studio for us is like sitting around by a cozy fire in an English pub and chatting about life and what's going on with each of us. So it's actually a really cozy feel when we get together like that. It is reminiscent of our past a little bit because, you know, we don't have that many English friends here. And it is quite, you know, we do reminisce about pub, you know, the smells of pubs and all of those things, those triggery things. But yeah, it's a nice environment to record in, and it enables us to be very honest and open about our sobriety and about our lives in general, because we have that sort of camaraderie within that room. I think if it was anywhere else, or we had to go to a posh recording studio in the city or something, we probably wouldn't feel so relaxed. But because it's just us in this tiny space, we sort of feel like we're just a room full of mates and we can talk about what we want. So it definitely makes us probably sometimes a bit too revolting and honest and brutal at times. But I guess that's what people like about it.
Yeah, definitely. And there's no point in kind of hiding things, because it is the nitty gritty, the stuff that's not talked about that people want to talk about. Because sobriety is the best thing ever for me, definitely, and I'm sure you'll agree it's the best thing that we've ever done. But it hasn't been easy, and there are things about living the alcohol-free life that are not great at all. And I think it's those things that we need to share, we need to be honest about, so that somebody on the journey doesn't think, oh, well, she said it's fine, it's great, and then this happened. Like, what am I supposed to do, like, when this happens? So the honesty and the openness, I think, is very, very important. And you've both got such a great sense of humor as well. And I think we need a sense of humor when we're not drinking sometimes.
I think we need to get off
with kids.
Yeah, it tends to be a little bit too toilet-based, our humour, but I think that's an English. We just can't help ourselves. We just go straight to the lowest common denominator, and that's generally what makes us both laugh. So unfortunately, if you're going to listen, you're going to get a lot of bottom and toilet-based humour.
I think it's about saying that you can be stupid and silly in sobriety. You don't have to lose all of that. Vic and I have discovered there's lots of things about ourselves that we thought were things that came with our drinking behaviour. Like, we were oversharers, we're pretty stupid, we're silly, we say crazy things, we do crazy things. We blamed that all on our drinking, but it turns out that in sobriety, when you are with somebody who is like you and you can talk about it and be open, it does bring out that more fun side of you. If you're stuck on your own in sobriety, you just feel so lost. And we've talked about it before, that you feel like everything's been stripped away, your entire personality. You don't know what you feel, you don't know what you want to do, you don't know what you like anymore. And it takes being with other sober people to be able to kind of pull that out of you and go, okay, I can still have a really good belly laugh here, even though I haven't had a drop of alcohol. And we have a lot of people who write in about the podcast saying it's made them laugh so hard and it's made them cry. And I think it's really nice to help people to get their emotions out in sobriety, because we're all a bit stiff and worried and, you know, white knuckling it through, like kind of relax and enjoy, and then this wonderful person will come out. And it's about sort of showing people that we're doing that with each other and they can do it too.
Yeah, and I was going to say, my face, I don't ever remember when I was a drinker, my face ever hurting from smiling. And nowadays I get that quite a lot. Like I feel like my face hurts from laughing so much. And I guess when I was wasted, I could never remember, you know, one moment from the next. So I wasn't conscious of my jaw aching from laughing so much. But it's a different sense of joy, isn't it, sobriety? Like you get to witness your failures and your wins, which can mean it's a bit of an emotional journey, but at the same time, it all levels out into a much more content life, which is something we all have to accept. You know, the ups and downs have disappeared into our past, and we're capable of living on this like one level content line, which is a much more satisfying way to live. But it doesn't mean to say we're perfect. I mean, it's something we talk about a lot is like, look, we still fuck up sometimes. We're still stupid. We still get upset and we still get angry. And, you know, I shout too much at my children and all these other things that go on in our lives. But we are happier. And that's a really important point, is that we are genuinely much, much happier than we were.
And it's nice to wake up knowing that the reason your face aches is from laughter, not from falling flat on your face on the pavement outside the pub or down a few flights of stairs. You don't know what it was, really, do you?
Mine was always the cut on my chin with Gail from the misplaced swan dive I used to do in a dodgy nightclub in Brighton every Friday night. So there's always a different type of aching.
Oh God. I remember waking up with like weird injuries that I couldn't quite remember how I got them, like a massive bruise on my back once. I was like, how on earth did that happen? But yeah, when we see something cut or we remember something, then we know exactly how it got there, which is important. And I do like what you said about the chaos being gone and everything's just on a level playing field now. We have ups and downs because it's life, obviously, but I thought that life was going to be really boring when I stopped drinking, because I wouldn't be, you know, this cool mom who had parties every night and the music was blasting and like the kids could do what they wanted. But actually, I really like the fact that sometimes nothing happens. I really like it that we've got boundaries, and I really like the calm and the quietness. And I don't know about you, but that's not boring at all. I thought it would just be awful to have a quiet house, but actually it's really, really nice to have a quiet house, whereas before there was a lot of chaos and unpredictability about life in general. Do you find that?
I do. I certainly find it. I know Vic does as well, but Vic's got 3 young children. So she probably lived her life in a lot of chaos still anyway, but I'm sure it's more calm, controlled chaos without the alcohol. There's a sense of having done it already for so many years, having lived my life that way with alcohol and with chaos, which at times I actually quite enjoyed when I was younger. I loved the chaos and the fun that alcohol brought and the laughs we would have the following morning. I'm a mother of teenagers, and I drank through most of their childhood. And I know what you mean when you say, you know, you're not the fun mum, and you're not the mum who is letting them have alcoholic drinks in the house and stay up late and turn up the music loud. I know a lot of my daughters' friends' mums do allow that, and I do sometimes worry that I'm the boring mum, but I know for a fact that they prefer me to be at home on the couch knitting when they get in at the end of the evening than what used to happen, which was I would be out and they would stay up waiting for me because they was worried about what time I get in, if I got in at all, and what kind of injury I'd done to myself. So there's it's a lot more calm, it's a lot better for the kids. And I also think there's a very fine line between calmness and boredom. I'm going to put my hand up here and say that sometimes sobriety can feel extremely boring, but it's about turning that around and reframing it and doing something creative with that time, or just as Vic always says, her saying is play that tape forward and think, okay, I'm bored, but if I were to pick up a drink, what will happen? Not good things in our case.
No, it's not as simple as it just being boring, isn't it? Because if we weren't boring, we would be drunk, and that leads to all other repercussions that are unhealthy for us and for our families. I think boring has a very bad name, doesn't it? It's like we need to redefine that word. And for me, being boring is the best thing that's ever happened to me. It means I'm stable, and it means I'm clear-headed, and it means I'm capable of getting up and taking my children to the park rather than lying in bed feeling like I want to die of anxiety. I mean, boring is overrated. For me, embracing boring is a wonderful thing. But of course, there are moments for all of us where, as Lucy says, we dip into the past and we have fantasies about alcohol where we thought we were fun and we thought we were this and that, and we miss those crazy times sometimes. But as Lucy said, we did that for 25 years. It wasn't possible for it to go on anymore because it was affecting our lives and it was affecting our mental health. It just wasn't a possibility. And I do say play the tape forward. That is one of my favorite sobriety sayings is, even when you do feel boring, what's more boring than sitting in a pub and repeating the same story and being with the same people and doing the same things every weekend and pouring a poisonous substance down your throat day in, day out. I mean, there's nothing more boring than that. So I always have a rebuttal if somebody calls me boring because, I question why they're asking me that or why they're, pushing that on me, because usually, of course, it's because they have their own issue with alcohol that they are, unsure of and probably want to know some answers. But I don't think of boring so much as being a bad thing. I think being boring is something that I love, and I look forward to being more boring as I age. Like I can't wait to not have to do the parenting things that I do at the moment and, act like the perfect mum and do all these other things that I actually really do find boring. Quite honestly, don't tell anyone. But I look forward to doing more, stuff that I would have found mundane in my past. And that's all it is. It's our pasts that have rewired our brain into thinking what boring is. And it's hard for us to step outside of that and go, actually, that's not boring. That's cool that you do pottery now. It's cool that you're able to go and do exercise and do all these creative things that you've never done before. And it's not boring. It's just called living. And it's a very, very different thing.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. So what kind of things have you started to do differently? Well, first of all, can I just ask where you are on your journey? And I know people say it's a journey, and it is. So Victoria, how many months are you alcohol free now?
I'm going to be 4 years on the 10th of March.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I started questioning my alcohol consumption after having my first child. Obviously, the shame and guilt of being a hungover parent infiltrated my hangovers and made me feel mentally unwell. And I tried to combine those two lives for far too long, for about 4 years. Yeah. And then I really started questioning even more after getting pissed 6 weeks after my second child was born. And that's when I decided to reach out for professional support.
Yeah. Okay. Well done. That's amazing.
Just so you've asked that the wrong way around, because what usually happens is I say how long I've been sober for, and then Vic comes on and trumps me.
Oh, wait a second. Lucy, how long have you been sober for then?
Piss off. I'm always so proud of how long I've been sober, but Vic got there way before me.
Yes, it's a win.
No, I've been sober for 1 year and 5 months.
Gosh, is it 1 year and 5 months already?
Wow.
Yes, it is.
I feel like
yes, no, I actually just looked at my app.
Oh, yeah.
Do you
I
count
never
the
will,
days?
will I? I
both
never
of
will
you?
catch up with you. It gives you so much pleasure.
Unless I fall off the wagon, then you'll get one up.
I'll take no pleasure in that.
No, fair enough. Neither would I. Don't do it.
That'd be a disaster. What would happen to the podcast?
Yeah, it'd be a good story.
The night Vic fell off the wagon.
Oh
No.
God, don't. It's giving me the fear.
Do you count the days, ladies? Or did you in the beginning?
I have an app, and Lucy, we both have an app that's
an
counted
app.
the days from the day that I stopped. Definitely, I do like checking in on that. And also, if it gets to a big number, it's an excuse to go and have a massage and a facial or something, isn't it?
Yeah,
I'm like,
get
oh,
some
it's
cake.
1,000 days. Oh,
Yeah.
it's 1,025 days. Yeah, it's an excuse to go and get a big slice of chocolate brownie for me. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I celebrate any wins. Yeah.
And any even number on the app, Vic goes out and gets a massage.
Yeah, basically.
And they say being sober is cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah, and why not to celebrating? I do think it's important to celebrate any and every milestone as we go along, because it's not easy. And I do think that often we start this journey with a sense of shame and guilt and regret. So anything that we can do to build ourselves up and make ourselves feel better for what we are doing, I think is a really good thing. So apart from facials and massages, how do you celebrate your alcohol-free lifestyle?
Well, I mean, I just sort of following on from what we were saying about kids thinking that we're boring because we're sober mums. I had my year, and it was a great sort of build up to it. I was so excited. I'd done a year sober. I couldn't believe it. And on the morning of my day, my year sober, your soberversary, is that what it's called? Soberversary. Yeah. My daughters had brought me a massive bunch of flowers. And the day before, my elder daughter, who works at a restaurant, had prepared a full picnic. She picked me up as a complete surprise. She prepared a picnic, which she took me to this really beautiful remote spot with a beautiful view, with two alcohol-free lagers in the picnic. She was 17 at the time. Now that just shows you how grateful your kids are that you've got sober, and that above anything else, they were so proud of me. So I think that was the best way to celebrate, and it just meant so much to me that it meant so much to them that they had to show me in that way. So I think that every year, the 17th of September is going to be a really special day for me, perhaps the most special of the year.
Yeah. Oh, that's so lovely, Lucy. And do you think that your kids, maybe a difficult question, do you think that your kids will kind of, I don't know what I'm trying to say, like my kids, for example, one of them was quite little.
Traumatized.
No, because I do think that mine in particular have been affected a lot. But do you think that they will get to the point where for them being sober, being alcohol free is just normal, as opposed to like when I was growing up and I was a kid, people always drank. It was just what they did. Do you think now, or as we get into the future, it'll be the opposite?
We talk about it a lot, Vic and I, because of my teens and her young ones, and mine having seen me drink, and hers will probably never see her drink. Our house is a alcohol-free house, and my teens have never once complained about that. It is just the way it is. They know that they don't drink in front of me, and if we go out for a meal, and my eldest is 18, she will ask me if it's okay to have a glass of wine. It's a perfectly natural thing for us now, and I've only been sober for a year and 5 months, and the rest of the time they've seen me as a complete pisshead. So yes, I do believe that having stopped drinking has really changed their drinking habits and the way that they drink about alcohol. But I know for Vic it'll be a very different story.
Yeah, I think for me, I feel like, because I'm from a big drinking family, that I felt like I never really had a choice whether to drink or not. I think it was the only way, of course, that I knew how to fit in, and the only way I felt accepted by my peers. So, of course, that's exactly the route that I took. I feel like by me not drinking now, my children are still very young and will never have seen me drunk. I mean, my son was 4, my eldest child was 4 when I gave up drinking. So I just think they will never know me as a drinker. And therefore, I hope they will have a choice and they will be able to drink or not drink, and know that whatever their choice, hopefully it will be the latter, that, you know, it wasn't my influence upon them, and therefore we can talk about it and have a conversation over it, rather than it be them, you know, wanting to feel love from me, which I guess it does come down to. I know it sounds cheesy, but the nitty gritty with kids and alcohol is if they are following you, and if their squishy little brain is having alcohol normalized in the house on a day-to-day basis, of course they're going to see that if they do the things that you do, you are going to love them more. And it's really basic emotions, but I've hoped that my children will feel love from me and understand outside of alcohol that they don't need to do that to be accepted. And that's going to be huge. And I'm hoping that's going to change. You know, I'm saying hope. You'll need to check in with me in 18 years to see if they've all gone off the rails and are all like drug addicts in rehab and all of that sort of thing. So I have to say hope. This is my plan, that by giving up drinking, I'm giving them more of an opportunity to not drink. So we'll see how that goes. But I just think actually just having no alcohol in the house, as Lucy says, I think is a really, really good start for any family. It's a bit of a tricky one at the moment, because they are starting to ask me, because obviously this is what I do now. Like, I have my website and I'm doing everything I do is related to alcohol. It's like a new addiction in another form. Yeah. So they do ask me about it. They say, Mum, when did you give up drinking, and what is sober, and why do some people's parents drink and you don't? And my son was saying that my husband still drinks. He has a couple of beers every now and again. Like, he's a normal drinker that can stop at 2, never a problem drinker. And my son was saying, you know, maybe I'll just have 1 or 2 like Dad. And I just thought, well, there you go. Like, even that amount, he's already planning that he's going to have 1 or 2 drinks when he's older. And I do think eventually, if I can, you know, nudge my husband into line a little bit more, that our house will be an alcohol-free house. Which does sound quite staunch, but also I feel like it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for the kids, and it's the right thing to do for their mental health in the future and in the long term. So, you know, me and Lucy people probably think we're really strict and weird and sober and odd, but I'd rather be weird and sober and odd than have children that are having issues with booze.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's enough places in the world, literally, when they step outside the door, put the radio on, the TV on, anything, where they are exposed to alcohol. In a way, it's quite nice to have a safe haven in your house where there is no alcohol, because it's the only place in the world that you can get away from it, is if you choose not to have it in your home.
Yeah.
My life was fueled by my parents' alcohol from a very young age. You know, I was stealing it out of the garage. It was piled up in the fridge. It was in an ice bucket on the counter. It was everywhere. You know, we spent our summer holidays getting the car over to France, filling her up, you know, and the exhaust pipe used to drag along the road as we came off the Channel ferry, because we had it piled up with as much alcohol, you know, when you did the booze runs to France. So, yeah, I think taking that away, you know, you can't control what happens outside the door, and you have to hope that they make the right decisions, and that your influence on them by the time they've walked out the front gate is good enough for them to make those choices. But I think it is a good thing to try and keep it at a minimum, and get them to understand the, you know, the negatives about alcohol and what it does, and teach them how to be their authentic self. So I remember saying to my son the other day when he was talking about this and the 2 beers, and I just said to him, like, you are enough without alcohol. And I know that sounds difficult to understand, and he's only young. That's what it's about. It's about trying to teach them that they are enough without having this toxic substance in their body, and they're capable of socializing. And it's about changing that mindset that we have to drink to have fun or go out or socialize or go to a wake or all of these things. Yeah. It's about teaching them that there is another way, and how you do that is a start is to perhaps not have any alcohol in the house, because you're not normalizing it then.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's because before we ever had a drink, we could do all of those things without alcohol. It was only once we started drinking, then we thought, oh, perhaps I can't do these things without alcohol, because that's what, well, the whole marketing, I don't really want to get into that today, but it is pushed on us and forced on us. And we are led to believe that we're not normal if we're not drinking, which is completely the opposite. I feel more normal now than I ever did, whatever that means.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't normal when I was drinking. I was abnormal.
Yeah, so about the conversations, like what you said before, Victoria, about talking to our children, I do think it's so important. And I do think that's one of the reasons why your podcast is so helpful, because it encourages us to have the conversation around drinking and alcohol and our own issues. Because for me, that was one of the things that kept me stuck, I suppose, for so long. I was worried about it. I would think about it. I would Google it a lot, look at all the podcasts, but I never really had the conversation because it was all so stigmatized and hush hush, and being scared, I suppose, of admitting that I had a problem because of what other people would think. Has that been your experience, and how has having the conversation helped? Who wants to go first?
Well, for me, the conversation, as I mentioned at the beginning of this chat, was really the winning component. Mm-hmm. The reason why this attempt, out of goodness knows how many attempts, had worked. The longest I'd given up previous to this time was 3 months. I spent the first 2 months of that in a hospital where I was unable to drink, so that kind of takes away some of that time because I was forced not to drink. But I did it alone, completely alone, and I didn't have anyone to have the conversation with. Like you mentioned, I looked up things on Google and I found some articles. I hadn't discovered any online groups or any chat spaces or any in-person social groups. I hadn't had the guts to join anything, even if I could find it. So it had been a very half-hearted search. So and then when it came to the end of the 3 months, I started drinking again, just as heavily as I was. It hadn't slowed me down at all. And in fact, I think that's a peril of giving up. Sometimes you actually go back to it even harder. So really, yes, it was great that I'd managed to give up for a short period of time, but it hadn't really helped me at all in the long run. And then when I actually connected with Vic and her sober group, and we would go and meet up, and I was talking to all these different people about their own experiences. And certainly my conversations with Vic, because we were just so similar in our drinking and in our past lives and in everything we'd done and in the way we thought about it all, in the way that we could laugh at ourselves. That was probably really one of the key things to my sobriety, was having someone who could laugh about the whole damn mess, which was the last 25 years of desperately trying to give up drinking and making a total hash of it every time, because I was desperate and I was upset and I didn't know what to do next. but just to make it a little bit more light-hearted. It gave me the space that I needed to breathe, and it gave me the space that I needed to move forward and to actually finally give up properly. The conversation is everything. Without that, it is extremely difficult to give up.
Yeah. And for us, our conversations always, you really have done some crazy shit. Like Lucy's stories made me feel not so alone. So that even in just one person, I was like, oh my God, I don't feel so bad now because her stories are so much worse than mine. I could shift the blame over to her and go, actually, every story she's told, she always had one up on me, which felt really good. Her stories are always a lot worse and always involved more injuries. One of my favorite ones of Lucy's, she just suddenly comes up with them in the podcast, and I can't imagine anything worse could have happened. And then she's like, oh yeah, I got hit by a car, and told that was my favorite one. Can you tell that one, Lucy?
Oh yes, when I was over in Tenerife and I was with my mate, and I got run over by a car and rolled over the bonnet and landed on all fours on the other side.
Oh my God.
I just stood up and told the driver to fuck off. Sorry, I hope I'm okay to swear in this podcast. But Vic found that particularly amusing. But it's funny you should say it, Vic, because I always find Vic's stories absolutely hilarious and often think she's got one up on me, like with her finger being blown off by a firework or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
I think we make each other feel better with our with kindred spirits in our craziness. And I guess that one of us will sort of have a confessional and tell this story that we don't often tell people, and instead of the other person looking at us in complete horror, we go, oh, that's nothing, let me tell you about the time I did this.
It's so true. We did a podcast where we had a little section called the shame shed, and I just put a post on my Facebook group to say to the women, look, we're going to do this podcast about all the terrible things we've done. What are yours? And I thought the post would just be a couple of people going, oh, I got a bit, I fell over, or, I fell down some stairs, or I did this, or had this one night stand. But it ended up being this huge, long stream of fascinating comments and stories from people. And it was extremely liberating. All of us on there telling our terrible tales of misadventure and misdemeanors. It was an absolutely fascinating read because we worked out, we're all the same. We've all been there. We've all done stupid things. There doesn't need to be any shame about it. If it was something really extreme, it still doesn't even matter because those stories don't represent us as people. And that's what I felt like after reading is there was a sense of freedom among the group because look, we are here. We're all together. We were all we're all fucked up, but look at us now. We're trying to do better and we're trying to do something with our lives. And isn't that an incredible thing? That we're all there and we've all got these crazy stories, yet we can recognize it and we can share it and we don't have to feel shame about it because that is not who we are. Our drunken selves are a kind of mad, lunatic version of us. We're not those people anymore. So there's no need to feel shame and regret. We had a drug pumping around in our body that was making us act out, and we are not alcohol. We are sober now, and we represent that in a different way, and we represent ourselves in a different way. And it's much more normal, and it can be perceived as boring, but fuck everybody else.
Yeah,
honestly.
Yeah. And I just think it helps so much to get these kind of things out. As you say, shame only exists, I think, through silence and suffering. But when we can talk about whatever it might be that we've done or that's happened, then it kind of shines a light on that shame and it makes it less. So eventually we can let go of it completely and we can move forward in our boring sober lives without the shame holding us back, I think. And you talked about your Facebook group, your community there. Can you just tell the listeners, I'm sure they know already, but a little bit about your community, because you've got an in-person one and an online one as well, haven't you? Is that right?
Yeah, so I started writing my blog the day I gave up drinking. I started to write a book, actually. I started to write a diary of I felt like the only person in the world, the only binge drinking parent who would ever quit alcohol. And I felt like that for about 18 months until I found this whole Sober Curious community. So I started writing every day about my experiences, about how weird it was being this only person in the whole world that didn't drink. And that turned into a book, which has turned into, my blog and on my Facebook group and meeting Lucy and on all of our online events and all that sort of thing. So it's just gone, one thing led to another. And I think this year there's going to be a lot more happening for Lucy and I. We're really excited. We've got some projects that we're working on, just all ways of getting people together and getting people to feel less isolated in their sobriety. We do meetups here in Australia, which is the Drunk Mummy, Sober Mummy meetups. And my blog is Drunk Mummy, Sober Mummy, and that's the Facebook group as well. Yeah. Again, there are loads of ways of, it's transforming on a day-to-day basis of how we connect and how we communicate in the world. And me and Lucy are kind of trying to keep up with each new kind of system and new app and new this and that. So we'll see how that all goes. We're not very tech savvy. So yeah, we'll try and keep up to date with it all to make sure that we've got all bases covered, and wherever you go, you've got an opportunity to meet someone who is going through the same thing as you, whether it's online or in person.
Yeah. I think we're being guided quite a lot by our podcast listeners. Bear in mind, we started the podcast thinking, we're just going to record our chats and put them out there, thinking we might have one or two people listening. But we've got quite a nice worldwide audience now. Yeah. So we might get a message from someone who's traveling across Canada in a camper van, or someone in Nebraska. And sometimes we have to look up on a map and go, oh, where's that? And it turns out like two people have contacted us and they're quite near to one another. And it's like, and they're both saying, oh God, I feel so alone. It's been so great to speak to you. Wouldn't it be so great if those two people could meet up? Yeah. And we often have people saying how lucky we are to have each other, and how they wish that they had somebody like I have Vic and Vic has me. Yeah. And we want to make that possible for people by getting people to communicate more and more. And so that's why Vic's group and her meetups are just so helpful. I will never forget what they did for me, and I know they can do the same for other people.
Yeah. We put that in the show notes, the Facebook group and your blog as well, Victoria, so people can read that. Perfect. So if anybody's listening and they're thinking, I really like the sound of this, or gosh, I'm really struggling, I don't know what to do next, what advice would you give to that person?
Well, I think the first, of course, our advice is always going to be listen to Sober Awkward from the beginning, because it is like a little toolbox, our podcast, because each episode is based around something we both experienced at different stages in our sobriety. It starts off with the realization that alcohol isn't your mate, and then we move on to your first sober social and what it's like being in a pandemic sober, and it just moves on with each topic and how you deal with it and how we dealt with it. We don't tell people on our podcast what to do. All we do is tell our stories and what we did. It's up to people find their own different sorts of support and therapy or AA or whatever they choose. We never specify what you should do, but we always say try and get professional support. And I think that would be what I would say to somebody that was first stepping out, questioning their alcohol intake, even if they haven't stopped, would be to, go to your GP first. During the pandemic, there's a mental health plan that you can get. I think in Australia anyway, it's 20 free sessions with a therapist. Use all of that free stuff that you can get your hands on. because that is really a good opportunity to tell your doctor what is going on with you, because it is an issue to discuss with a doctor. It's not something you're just going to go, okay, I'm going to stop drinking and everything's going to be fine. It won't work. I think for me, and I know for a lot of people, I had to dig down into the roots of why I drank in the first place. And I could never have unpacked the stuff that I know now without that therapy that I had. Because I was able to understand, when I was talking about love area and love and saying, that I didn't feel that growing up because alcohol was everywhere and I felt everyone was preoccupied with that. It took therapy for me to understand those reasons and to unpack and unravel almost everything that had gone on in my life. And I was able to lay it all down and pick the bits out that I still wanted to keep and take away the stuff that was toxic to my life. And it takes a professional to guide you through that. So definitely for me, my best advice is to get the help you so are worthy of. And don't worry that if you think your drinking isn't bad enough to deserve professional support. That is a message that we drum in every episode is, look, lots of people don't reach out because they feel like their problem isn't bad enough or extreme enough. Just because you're not passed out on a park bench with a bottle of vodka, it doesn't mean to say you're not worthy of help. You are. And no matter how big or small your problem is, any problem is deserving of intervention. And if you get help, it means it will ripple through your family for generations to come. You can change the legacy of a lifetime and be this huge, brilliant influence rather than being someone hiding in your bedroom with a hangover. So yeah, definitely professional support that you most certainly do deserve.
Yeah, that's so true. Thanks, Victoria. Lucy, what advice would you give?
Well, I would say the same as Vic about going to get professional support. However, that didn't work for me. I saw probably about 15 to 20 professionals, and none of them were able to tap in and give me the help that I needed. And eventually I found the support by just meeting Vic in a cafe. So I think my advice is, yes, go to your GP, definitely as a starting point, but never give up trying to give up and keep trying different things, because it might surprise you, the one that actually works. I'm a introvert. I very rarely go out of my house and I don't enjoy socializing. So for me, having found a person and a social group that was my savior, was the last thing I was going to go looking for. So just don't give up. If you've tried loads of times and it hasn't worked, don't do what I did, which was I decided I was just going to drink myself to death because there was no way out of it. Keep trying different things, even things that are outside your comfort zone. And even if you only manage to give up for 2 days, that's 2 days when you haven't had a drink. Keep going, keep trying, because you will get there.
Yeah,
that's really
true. Listen to the podcast. Yeah. I mean, the reason we made that podcast and called it Sober Awkward is because being sober and those first stages, it is one of the most awkward things you will ever experience. I describe it as the bright light shining on you whenever you're out. Everything feels raw, everything feels new, and it is extremely overwhelming. But it does get easier, and you just have to keep on at it, keep climbing up that hill, because it is so bloody satisfying when you get to the top and you see the view from there, because there's nothing better than being clear-headed and your brain working again. I mean, that sounds crazy, but Lucy would agree. I know, like, our brains work now. Our brains have been pretty much, dead for like the last 25 years. They've just been pickled in formaldehyde, and we've just been sort of bumbling through life. God knows how we survived. But now we're really productive. Like, I parent, and then I do a blog post, and then I go for a walk. We are functional humans now, whereas we weren't before. And I'm not saying that in a smug way to go, oh, look at me now. Like, I'm just saying it as like, it is a happier life. It is something that is going to make you feel better mentally and physically. So it is worth sticking at it and doing all those things, going to therapy and trying all these different things until you find what works, because it is so worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I sometimes wonder how on earth I got anything done when I was drinking, because now I'm just like you, gosh, yeah, I do all of this and it's normal to do all of these things. But before, sometimes you could hardly even get out of bed. So I'm quite surprised that that my children are still alive sometimes, because what I
we were
did
talking
do.
about this. We talked about this in our last podcast, which was about anxiety. We were very shocked, like you just reminded me there about just staying in bed all day. Lucy and I were quite shocked that throughout our lives, we had days booked out in our diaries for mental health, well, mental illness, basically. We would, say, right, I can't go out on Sunday because I'm going to the pub on Saturday night and I know I'm going to overdo it. So therefore, I'm going to block a whole day out to feel like shit.
Yeah.
And to me now, that just seems like total madness.
Yeah.
Like I knew that I was going to do that to myself. So I'd block a day out to be in bed and then I would repeat that behavior the following weekend. And now the relief of not having to feel that way anymore is really spectacular. Like that is the biggest thing in sobriety, is not to have hangovers and feel that horrible, tumultuous, tormented brain like we had then. It's clear the fog is lifted.
Absolutely, it has. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Anything you want to say to our lovely listeners before we go?
Listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
Take it one step at a time, right from the first episode all the way through. No, I only say that because, like Vic said earlier, we have kind of created it as a kind of toolbox. So if there is anyone out there who's feeling awkward about giving up and how they're going to manage this crazy thing called life as a sober person, it's really good to just listen to us. And also we do recommend a lot of other resources on the podcast. So just really find as many things around you to support you. Get that GP support, get some sober books. There's some great stories out there. Vix is going to come out soon. I'm waiting for that one.
Hopefully. 1,000 Wasted Sundays, my book's going to be called. So it's with the editor. You never know. Give me a year. Hopefully that'll be out there. I've still got a few terrible tales to add. The other thing I was going to say to your listeners, Gail, is just a really good tip, which is something I did early on, which I've mentioned before in our podcast, is if you are struggling and you don't know what to do, one thing I did very early on was to make an Instagram account specifically for sober people. So, excuse me, I just followed sober people on Instagram. It was a private account. I made my name, which was @DrunkMummySoberMummy, if you want to follow me. And then I just followed thousands of sober people. So whenever I felt lost or alone or awkward, I could just pop on there and have a look and get some inspiration, whether it's a quote, a story, a photo, or whatever. It was a huge help to me, and it still is. I know we moan about the internet and social media, but for sober people, it can be a really, really helpful tool, especially these groups. It's like online 24/7 support at your fingertips. So really do take advantage of that.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming, both of you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Nice to meet you.
Thank you for having us on.
You're welcome.